Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how the high protein trend is transforming the snack aisle. I'm Nitya, editor at Annex Business Media, Canada's largest B2B media company, and I'm here as your host on behalf of Food in Canada. Before I introduce today's panelists, I have a few housekeeping details to go through. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the National Sunflower Association, who helped make this webinar possible. They also have this message for us. US grown high oleic sunflower oil continues to support innovation across today's evolving food industry. As manufacturers respond to growing demand for protein rich snacks, high oleic sunflower oil offers valuable functionality, including excellent shelf stability, a neutral flavor profile, and strong performance when blended with other oils and solid fats. It is also non GMO and kosher and halal certified, making it a versatile choice for modern product development, including plant based applications where texture and mouthfeel are critical. To learn more or find a supplier, visit sunflowernsa.com. Now, to our participants, if you're watching along with us, the audience is in listen only mode. We will be taking questions throughout the discussion. So feel free to drop a question at any time using the Q&A button on your Zoom window. We are recording today's session, and all registered participants will get an email with a link to the recording in the next few days. With that, I'd like to welcome our panelists. Dr. Mehmet Tulbek is the president of Saskatchewan Food Industry Development Center. With over 25 years of global experience in research, technology, and innovation across pulses, cereals, oilseeds, and plant-based foods, Mehmet is recognized as a leader in advancing agri-food research and development. At the Food Center, he leads the organization's strategy, planning, and operations. An inventor and author, Mehmet is the chair of the board of directors of the Agriculture Council of Saskatchewan, a board member of the Canadian Food Innovation Network, and is an adjunct professor at the Universities of Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Alexandra Barlow is the vice president of programs at the Canadian Food Innovation Network. Alex is an economic development advocate and business advisor with over a decade of experience in writing, researching, and administering government incentives at both the provincial and federal levels. An avid and passionate supporter of Canadian innovation, Alex frequently presents cash flow strategies and funding best practices to business audiences. Nick Gibson has worked at Nielsen IQ for 10 years on various issues ranging from consumer insights to pricing. Today, he helps the grocery industry evolve towards consumer desires for health and wellness, sustainability, and other important product attributes. If he's not crunching data on these trends, you will find him researching the latest personal health insights, being active at the gym or sports, or pondering about the world and how to make it better. Dr. Alejandra Regand is a seasoned food science and innovation executive with more than 20 years of experience leading R&D, baking technology, and regulatory compliance across North America. As Senior Director of R&D and Baking Technology at Bimbo Canada, Alejandra leads the end-to-end product development pipeline across all categories. Alejandra is known for a collaborative approach, technical depth, and ability to coach and empower diverse teams. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today. So let me start off with Alex first. Protein has become mainstream, so much so that ingredients like whey are in short supply. Now, what's driving this shift?
Yeah, it's a super interesting question because I've noticed it obviously as a consumer and then of course in our work at the Canadian Food Innovation Network. I think first a big shift in consumer shift into functional eating. So people are asking sort of what does this food do for me? And I think that ties in, a lot with the talk and sort of trends around GLP-1 medications, where users might be eating less. And so really prioritizing like macros around that intake and really ensuring that they're getting enough protein to maintain muscle. And, lastly, I'd say there has been a real shift in how people are eating and to the point where I think we're starting actually to come full circle. But the Agri-Food Analytics Lab out of Dalhousie noted that omnivorous diets in Canada are on the sort of decline. So omnivorous being that traditional, I'll eat anything, I eat protein, animal protein, perhaps at every meal. And we're seeing flexitarian diets where people are prioritizing more plant-based foods on the rise, which has kind of been interesting. So you've seen lots more protein-enhanced snacks. People are trying to achieve those daily values with lots of sort of non-meat proteins at the forefront. But actually now we're starting to see even some meat proteins make a comeback and sort of an anti, alternative protein trend. For example, a member we've been working with is called Carne Bar out of Western Canada, and they're creating a dehydrated savory snack that's made with jerky and fruit. So they're going back to that sort of clean ingredient and meat products. So those sort of three key trends: functional eating, GLP-1s, and then sort of the real shift in diets that we're seeing, I think are some key factors.
It's great. Thanks, Alex. Nick, you were nodding your head a lot, so I'm sure some of that resonates with you. But are there any other shifts that you'd like to highlight?
No, I think Alex hit it on the head. I would just add that from a pricing perspective, what we talked about supply, right? So I don't have particular insight on supply per se, but I can tell you that certainly the inflation in the price of products containing whey protein has increased faster than the overall food and bev average. So there does seem to be some pressure there that might be, at least in part, coming from the supply chain challenge.
Mehmet, you're in the protein, center of, Canadians in the center of all of that, where you're situated. So, are there any other shifts that you're seeing that's driving this demand? I mean, Alex mentioned, flexitarian diet is on the rise. So thoughts
Well,
from
what we
you?
are seeing, just to follow up with Alex and Nick, especially we have to really analyze Gen Zs and Gen Alphas in detail because they're not consuming like millennials. So and then they apparently they like meat proteins, and they have more time for snacking, and things are like much different with the new consumers coming into the market. So because of that, we are seeing some of this impact, like we are seeing a huge interest in the meat snacks category. And there's not even enough production capabilities in Canada for these products because, in particular, like it affects from silent generation to baby boomers all the way to the Gen Alphas, meat snacks addressing that interest. And it's basically indulgence, but also the purposeful eating. They like
Yeah.
their protein, they like the taste, they like the meat. So that's something that we are seeing more and more, and it's driving that. And it's not part of the plant-based. But on the other side, like we are seeing a huge interest in the plant-based ingredients into the food applications. Again, it's all related to, again, more purposeful eating, impact of the satiety and energy balance and convenience for all these positioning of the products from the consumer side. So those are some of the things that what we observe at the moment.
Yeah. And Mehmet, what you said was interesting. You mentioned about how plant-based protein ingredients are being used across different products. I know Bimbo recently launched a high protein line under Dempster's. I know that's not snacking, but Alejandro, I'm sure some of the insights that drove Dempster's to launch that product would be relevant for this webinar as well.
Yes, Nithya, we actually did some research last year, and we discovered 70% of Canadians are interested in taking a high protein intake from any different products. But I think what is important here is that we're seeing that shift from protein as a sport in the sports nutrition drinks and the very targeted as a niche to becoming a mainstream ingredient for products that are staples in our diet, and bakery is a clear example of that. So that's a big shift.
That's great. Mehmet, I want to ask you, I mean, has the definition of snacking changed in recent years? And if so, where does protein fit into that shift?
Well, I think I talked a little bit about it in the previous question you asked. The definition of the snacking is definitely changing. Snacking used to be about all indulgence. It's all about having the right type of taste, flavor. It's just almost like a quick, just get out of the place and let me try this product. And then people, they really didn't care about the sodium levels or the sugar levels and added sugar levels and so forth. But then over the last 5 to 10 years in particular, we are seeing it more and more into purposeful eating. And snacking definition is really driven by more into indulgence, into purposeful eating. And now we are looking at replacing even the meals. So people are skipping lunches, they are skipping dinners, and they are consuming more and more protein and fiber. And they are trying to eat smaller meals and functional eating. That is all driven by throughout the day. And protein became the center of this because it's addressing all the needs of the satiety, energy balance, convenience, health positioning. It's like the muscle health, muscle buildup, like with all this Ozempic diets and the GLP impact. People, they are quite aware of the fact that they need the protein to keep their bodies healthy, to keep their muscle distribution healthy. So because of that, protein is really driving that. And because of all the reasons, consumers like it and companies presented it. And now we are seeing challenges in the supply chain, and we are seeing some really unprecedented prices, in particular around the dairy proteins, dairy ingredient proteins, or dairy-based ingredients. So.
Absolutely. Nick, I'm just curious about one thing. I mean, when consumers are looking for high protein products, I mean, is it just the protein content, or is there something else that they're looking for in that particular product? Are there any macro indicators that they're keen on?
Yeah, I think, I mean, so far the points made have indicated this to some extent, but maybe we'll just double click on this point. We're kind of we've gone through the maturity phase, if you will, of this protein craze, right? So now we're starting to see, the products that maybe just added protein on top of them that weren't particularly the most nutritious products. People are starting to, click into that, be like, oh, actually, maybe that was helpful to get the protein, but I'm not getting the other nutrients that I need, right? And so increasingly, I think what we're seeing is, yes, if you're on the go and you're looking for a particular level of protein, then yes, level of protein is helpful, but nutrient density is increasingly important. So think about, what you don't want in the product, right? Amounts of sugar, maybe it's sodium, maybe it's artificial ingredients of various sorts. Then it's also what else you want in the product, right? So micronutrients, potentially fiber, if that makes sense. So increasingly, it's a bit of a none of this, more of that. And if the trends continue to go in the direction that they seem to be for folks wearing things like Oura rings or using ChatGPT to continue to optimize the types of things that they're consuming and eating, it's going to be much more personalized to a particular person. So some people need more fiber, some people need less protein, and things like that. So I would say that yes, in a snapshot, having higher protein on the product might be of use if you're on the go. If you're just came from the gym and you're in a hurry, you need to get some additional protein, then that might be the thing to do. But I personally speak this as a more of a consumer centric lens here. If I'm on the go and I'm looking for a protein bar, I still struggle, frankly, to find protein products, protein bars specifically, that are not just having the protein content, but also are free from a lot of the other stuff. There are some great products out there, but unfortunately, oftentimes when I'm searching for them in a convenience store or things like that, they're not there. So I think that is an anecdote of a larger story and a larger narrative that we're seeing playing out in the data as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Alejandra, I mean, this is an interesting thing. Like when Demsys came out with their line of high protein, there was a conscious effort being made to make sure the mouthfeel remains the same. The sensory, it meets the customer's sensory expectations. Can you speak to that? Because you took a different line, right? You just didn't think you use a different variety of protein products to up the protein level of those products. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Yes, for sure. And this goes back a bit to what Nick was talking about, that it's not just the grams of protein, but the delivery that is super important. So the product has to still maintain the same characteristics, the same sensory taste, texture as your regular product in the market. So bagels need to have the same texture, same chewiness, any bakery product. So what we had to do was to go back to very basic science and research, product development, on really understanding what are the best type of proteins that complement the gluten in this case, so wheat protein, and how can we balance them together. In this case was with pea protein to really complete that quality of the protein and get the most for our buck with the least amount of intrusion or disruption into the gluten network and the characteristics of the bakery products that we make. So we had to go to deep food science to understand the chemistry, the reaction, the retention of water, and then adjust all of these parameters in our recipes and our processes to make sure that the delivery was still there and that our consumers will be still buying the product for maintaining their drivers, the main drivers there.
Thank you, Alejandra. There is a question here. Maybe you or Mehmet can handle that. It's about what method of calculation is used when claiming for protein in the products.
Oh, it's the PDCAS, it's called, and it measures the quality of the protein in the product.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Alex, I want to come to you next. Now, with high protein claims proliferating, is there a risk of consumer fatigue or skepticism? And if so, how should brands protect the credibility of the claim?
Yeah, I certainly think that the risk is real. And I think we're already starting to see it a little bit. When every granola bar on the shelf has a protein badge, the claim really loses a lot of signal value. Personally, I think there's sort of four ways to really protect claims that you're making and ensure that you're backing that and you're not going to be sort of a picked up once and never purchased again. Anchoring to a meaningful threshold. Obviously, grams per serving or a percentage of your daily value versus just a badge. Leading with your actual protein source, not just the grams. I mean, as Nick was sort of alluding to, there's some bars out there that have ingredient lists that read more like a high school science experiment than an actual food product, and especially for me, as someone who works in this space, for those of you on the call, a lot of things that we might see as emulsifiers or binders are commonplace to us, but to regular consumers, it can be a red flag. They don't understand what these ingredients are or why they're there. Overclaiming on subpar products. So again, as I think said already, the sensory experience will kill you faster than anything. And then with front of pack labeling now, really watching out that you're not making some competitive claims, high protein while also tagged for high in saturated fat. There's going to be a bit of a cognitive dissonance for your consumers, for the buyer, and they may leave your product on the shelf. So I think those are some important ones. Something I think that's interesting is this trend is kind of coming up in the Canadian diaspora against also a bit of a buy Canadian or the elbows up type behavior. And a lot of the production capabilities of many higher protein snack products are sometimes not here in Canada. And so finding Canadian source products can be a little more challenging. We've funded projects with a group, for example, out of Mississauga, Truly Foods. They're doing the high protein cereal, and they built a dedicated manufacturing line for high protein, whey-based cereals. And it's a clean ingredient list. They've really earned that protein claim, but by making that investment in their domestic production capacity, they've reshored their production here in Canada. They've allowed themselves to scale, but they're also opening themselves to be home as a co-manufacturer to other Canadian brands who are currently outsourcing in the US. So I do think that ownership of those processing capabilities is very important. And I think, for example, groups like Mimit are key pieces of the infrastructure to allow us to build these products here. Because I don't think that they're going away entirely. Like, protein is an important source. We've got an aging demographic. But we need to also make sure that we can make these things here, that we're not just purchasing US-based supply.
Absolutely. Alex, there's a question for you from Pauline. She's asking, where does Truly Food source their whey from?
Excellent question. I believe mostly from Canada, but they've also run into the supply chain challenges that Nick was speaking from. So hard to turn up the volume of cheese you make, and whey being a byproduct in dairy manufacturing and under a supply managed industry here in Canada. Definitely a tricky challenge to make or to address.
Yeah, for sure. Mehmet, you work with a lot of startups and young manufacturers. So when they're talking about product development, what are you advising them, especially on the high protein side?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I would talk about more, let's try to figure out your formulation and then making sure it's a tasting product. It's a great tasting product, which consumers will like. And then if it's different type of proteins, let's make sure, this is readily available and the cost is ready. Now the discussion is like when they come with a protein product, first is what is the protein you like to use? And then can you find it? And what's the price? So that's the situation. So after that, then we get into the discussions with the clients, because right now it's basically because of the impact we are seeing in the whey protein 90, 80, even 35, and now dairy companies are looking at more and more even protein products, even more and more fat products. Like we are seeing 6% milk, 6% fat milk. We are seeing way high protein yogurts, high protein milks. Like this is all around. And there's not enough byproduct available. 2 to 3 years ago, there was excess byproduct. Right now, there's hardly any byproduct. And now it has an impact on the plant-based proteins. It has an impact on pea proteins and fava bean proteins or other type of products. And now it's going down to all the way down to soy and wheat, gluten, and other products. And we are all in the game all together. And that's why, since the beginning, I've been working in this field close to 30 years next year. So we need all the proteins available. We need to look at all the proteins available, wherever the sources they are coming from, as long as they're high quality, safe, good to use. And then there's a market for all of them. But right now, really, it's the main discussion is availability and the pricing and how it fits in the product. And some startups, they come with all the ideas. Some startups, they don't know what to do. And again, in our organization, we help we run about 170 projects a year in average. And then there's so many startups, so many people coming and looking at like flavor masking or texture management or dryness or bitterness, process functionality, shelf life stability, cost. Like the manufacturers, you have to prepare them. You have to prepare your client. You have to prepare yourself, whether you'll be manufacturing for them, but we can do so much. I mean, our facilities, as much as we can do, but we have so many responsibilities, so many clients we need to help. Then this knowledge needs to be transferred to the co-packers. Then we have to be helping the co-packers and connect them with the people in Canada, if not in the United States, other parts of the world. So there are a lot of things to do, but the discussion in the last year changed a bit.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Mehmet. Alejandra, I want to come to you next. I want to check with you. I know you, again, I want to reiterate the fact that it's not a snack product, that's more baked goods product, but there are technical hurdles, right? When you're trying to create a high protein product. So what are some of the technical hurdles and how are manufacturers like Bimbo handling it?
Yes, well, plant-based proteins interfere with that gluten network that we have in the bakery product. So it's very important to have the least amount of interference. These plant-based proteins absorb a lot of water, And also it could become challenging. What Mehmet was talking about, shelf life control, absorption, baking profiles, the impact of texture. So all of this needs to be controlled by different ways. In the recipe, you will need to manage the amount of water you're adding to the product, so that's your absorption level. You will need to adding other acidulants to improve the pH of the product so it doesn't spoil that fast. We are also working with different technological solutions like enzymes or other things to help you in a natural way to get the best recipe and the best quality. All our products they don't have FOP signs, so for FOP avoidance, of course, we work with low sugar, low sodium levels, low fat, and also natural flavors and colors. So we are really working with a very, very clean recipe that we don't have a lot of levers to pull. So the levers that we pull are just the basic levers on managing your pH, your water activity, your moisture content, and your process to make sure that is your dough as tolerant as possible. And it has still that great texture and a great flavor. We don't use any flavor maskers, nothing like that. It's just really basic chemistry.
Thank you, Alejandra. Alex, would you like to add to that?
Maybe first to say that, a good piece of high protein toast with some peanut butter is a pretty decent snack in my book, but I don't want to take the title of snack away from Alejandra.
I agree.
But I agree with everything that said. I think texture, flavor, stability are big challenges. We've seen a number of food tech innovations come through our programming focused on helping with off flavors or even gritty textures or bitter flavors from plant-based proteins. Groups like Renaissance Bioscience from Vancouver or CBS Bioplatforms in Calgary. These are companies working on addressing some of those issues in the plant-based world, which obviously is a massive opportunity as one of the, if not the leading, one of the largest pulse exporters in the world. We've got enormous opportunity sort of with that claim to fame and the increased interest in protein.
That's important. Nick, there's a message in the chat, and I think that's something interesting for us to dwell on a little bit. So he's talking about how the person is talking about how when you're using soy or pre-protein, we need to mask the flavor to create a delicious product. So in such instances, people are naturally using certain sweeteners or sugar to do it. So the question is, will a higher sugar level be perceived as okay? Now we do have the FOP labeling as well, so that's obviously influencing consumer decisions. How is that playing out on the retail side?
It's I think it's both obvious and not obvious at the same time. So generally speaking, I would say, I was looking at some data this morning. I still think I have it up here, speaking to sugar, because you can look at sugar and sweetening more broadly in a few different ways, right? There's natural sugars of an ingredient that's already in there, like a fruit, for example, right? People tend to perceive the fruit a little bit differently than added, more refined added sugar of some sort, or even some sort of sugar sweetener or sugar alternative that is a sweetener. So that's kind of number one. More broadly, yeah, I think people are trying to find ways to mitigate their sugar intake. However, there are certain categories that I've seen that people are much more averse to artificial sweeteners of various sorts, and they're willing to say, I'll take sugar instead. I kind of know the devil I know over the devil I don't is kind of a little bit of the mindset to some extent, but it's a little bit binary. Certain categories that will exist, and other categories they're willing to take the alternative rather than the sugar. So I tend to find each category by category specifically, but generally speaking, if you can find a way to avoid the added sugar to having an already base of fruit-based sugar or something like that is usually perceived better, but the added sugar tends to be where the challenge will be. And so if you have to add sugar, then the minimization of that would be helpful, because we're definitely seeing when we think about front of pack labeling, when we think about even just products that might fall under the threshold of front of pack but still have added sugar, those products aren't performing on average as well as products that can avoid the no sugar added. It can make the no sugar added claims and things of that sort.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. Mehmet, there's a question here. Maybe you can respond to that. Is calculated protein value sufficient to support a claim, or do we need to send it to lab for certification?
Yeah, that's not enough.
Yes, that's not enough. Quite Alanda.
Yeah, no, you want to go, Mehmet, that's
Yeah,
good.
no, it's not enough. You need a certified lab, and in the United States, PDCAS has to be tested, whether in vitro or in vivo if needed. But like many companies, they are basically moving away from in vivo, like mice studies, because of ethical reasons. In Canada, it's still for PR. And then after that, PDCAS can be used, and it's in the process of they are looking at. Health Canada is looking at some new reforms to look at, but at the moment, still the PER with my studies. And then hopefully they'll be adding some more options on the PDCAS and in vitro studies too. These are like fairly straightforward studies. The external labs, they can get back to you in 2 weeks. And they are like very highly correlated with in vivo studies as well.
Thank you, Mehmet. My next question is to you and to Alejandra. It's about how do different protein sources behave in common snack formats like bars, extra snacks, and crackers?
Different protein sources. Go ahead,
Yes.
you go first.
I just very quickly, I'm talking about bakery. So it's very different, the behavior of these plant-based proteins in bagels versus tortillas versus bread. So for tortillas, we're looking for a low viscosity protein that is more elastic, that has that pliability, that can give us that rollability in a tortilla. For a bread, we are looking for more strength, for tolerance during processing conditions, not so much water absorption. Bagels, even stronger dough. It has to withstand boiling and then baking, and so each item, each category has its own challenges and its own opportunities as well. So the source of the ingredients is different, actually. So we have different protein blends for each category. And of course, with all of them, the target, the goal is still the same. You need to meet your minimum protein quality. And at the same time, well, the grams come from that, but the main and the best taste and texture possible, the best sensory.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alejandra.
Yeah.
Mehmet?
Just to add, Alejandra, overall, it depends on the application. And when you look at the bakery segment, and if you are using like a wheat flour, typically additional proteins, they dilute the wheat flour system. So it dilutes the impact of the gluten. So you have to look at how this wheat flour and the gluten will interact with the pea proteins, lentils, flavas, whey, because it's going to reduce the loaf volume. It's going to create more like density in the product. It's not going to interact like a gluten, but then you go to sheeted applications, then they function differently. You go to tortillas, they function differently. When you come to extrusion, in the extrusion side, like whether do you want a puffed product or you want an extra puffed product or you want a sheeted product, fried product, all products, they have all their functionalities. That's why we need to understand like how they perform all the way from like their moisture specifications going into their flow properties, particle size, water binding, oil binding, viscosity, gelation. There are like over 80 to 100 functional attributes you can look at with different type of equipment. So typically 20 to 25 of them are important. So based on your characterization and based on how the product tastes, how they functions in terms of sensory, inclusion rate, what you are planning to achieve, we have a way to utilize all the proteins in a different application. So all proteins are great, whether they go to beverage or pet food or snack or different type of application, we can address the needs of the ingredient manufacturer as well as for the end user.
Thanks, Mehmet. Alex, I want to check with you. I mean, what technical breakthroughs have made high protein snacking more viable at scale? I know we don't really have the processing capacity, but it seems like there are too many technical challenges to do it at this point.
Yeah, well, I think there are some key enabling sort of categories to technologies that are pushing this space forward. And quite a few of them, we certainly are investing significant dollars here in Canada through groups like Protein Industries Canada in building either the research capacity or the actual processing capacity. But protein fractionation and isolation, whether it's different whey isolates, micellar casein, pea and fava concentrates. These are that particular product now has a much cleaner flavor profile than a decade ago. A lot of that extrusion process optimization, whether you're looking at like screw speed, moisture, temperature to accommodate protein inputs. You can now get crunchy extruded snacks viable at 15 to 20 grams of protein. They're not always going to have the same snap and deliciousness. I think of the Quest protein chips, which I personally found a tiny bit disappointing as a snack lover when I got them. But the numbers are there if you're really hunting for that. And then a lot more opportunity, I think, around protein blending. So can you combine whey or dairy and plant proteins to hit targets while allowing for cost considerations? You can perhaps better nail flavor, and you might get a more complete set of amino acids. We've certainly seen in the plant-based space, as I sort of mentioned, a couple projects around enzymatic approaches to address plant-based protein flavors and trying to address that sensory gap that is remaining. And solving flavor issues like that with enzymes rather than through masking is quite novel and something that we're seeing. But I do think that, a really great tasting, clean label, 20-gram plus protein snack that has great texture is honestly still a bit of a white space and an opportunity area. And I would think that if you're on the call and you're looking at increasing or, moving into protein claims, we have a number of research facilities across this country who have enormous capabilities to help problem solve challenges like that. I think if you look like someone like Bimbo, they've got a huge team and capability, around that. But for smaller brands, leveraging groups like Mehmet's facility or groups like, for example, First at George Brown might allow you to work through some of these challenges with some supports for a smaller brand where you don't have the full in-house capability to troubleshoot some of these, very tricky challenges.
Thanks, Alex. Nick, I wanted to check with you. You probably have answered this already, but what role does the source of protein play in consumer choices as it relates to clean label?
Yeah, I think I don't think we've seen this teased out quite as much as I'd hope. So I'll caveat that up front. But my sense in seeing the data so far is that let's kind of combine a little bit of what we're seeing in plant-based foods writ large, or non meat-based foods writ large, and this sort of protein piece, right? So plant-based had its bit of a peak in the sort of 2020, 2021-ish era, and had a little bit of a retrenchment. At least a segment of it had a bit of a retrenchment in the years after that. So I do see that whey protein, just from the data perspective, is definitely peaking relative to these other ones. It's finding its way into a number of categories, unlike some of these other ones. Whereas I think there was a question, in fact, around seed oils and things like that. I think some of these other protein sources are being conflated a little bit with quality concerns and other sort of impacts. So I think ultimately it's TBD. We have to really tease out this question a little bit more, because we've had this sort of peak, anything protein is good, phase. And I think consumers, particularly the more informed consumers, are starting to make those delineations, not simply around the other ingredients, but also, to your point, around the protein source specifically. But the data is still, jury's still out, perhaps on that front. But I anticipate that we're probably going to see people talking about things like what I think Alex mentioned around amino acid profiles and things like that. I think that sort of thing is probably something I'm going to keep an eye on a little bit more in terms of the consumer and sales data coming through.
Absolutely. Alejandra, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you, Nick. I just would like to add there that sometimes there are constraints as well with allergens that we need to manage, and also with consumers, right? So I'm sure that some consumers are looking for dairy-free, soy-free solutions as well available in the market. And that's why when the plant-based options become relevant, like peas, lentils, and also in general, just the production of Canadian lentils, it's very high, and it's something that we really want to leverage, as going back to the elbows out and supporting the Canadian economy. In our plants, 100% of the flour that we use, it comes from Canada, and for these type of projects with proteins, we always as well try to favor as much as possible buying Canadian protein as well. So those have been also part of our the criteria that we're using to select the sources, in addition to all the other points that I mentioned before. But yeah, I want to call out that has been very important for us as well to maintain that. And the quality, when you complement each other, the amino acids, the two of them make a complete protein source. So it doesn't necessarily need to be coming from a complete protein separate, but if you combine the gluten with the pea protein, you make a complete source. So that's super important, because, and that's what really the government is asking from us, right? That's what the criteria is to get a PDCAS, that is the quality of the protein that we need to make a claim. So all of that is regulated, and that's part of the requisite.
Thank you, Alejandra.
Can I just add?
Yes, Nick.
So to her point, I think it's an important one. It kind of speaks to a broader challenge, right? You're trying to balance many things at once, right? So we're talking a little bit more narrowly here around protein specifically, but discussion around taste, discussion around allergens, discussion around even how well that product is going to sit on shelf, like how long is it going to last, right? It's freshness, and obviously, is it going to be perishable? All these things are important from a consumer lens specifically, and the folks on this call, on this panel, are the expert on those pieces way more than me. But from a consumer perspective, I think we also would be mistaken to make the same mistake of saying it's all about protein now, and then we're going to go to the next thing, whether it's fiber or whether it's some other specific type of a protein, stuff like that. It's actually increasingly about, I mentioned before, removal of things, addition of things, but more and more optimization, right? So certain consumers are going to be thinking about a profile of, I have certain allergens, I'm a GLP-1 user, and I need a certain amount of protein more because of, in general, it's good for me, but also because of the risk of, muscle atrophy, stuff like that. And I am a pretty proud Canadian, and I want to make sure I get as much Canadian products as I can, right? That's going to be different than maybe another person who's saying, you know what, I'll just get the minimum amounts of protein. I'm really focused on ensuring that my sugar levels are managed. I'm not using GLP-1. I'm not a diabetic, but I want to manage this because maybe I have that in my family. So increasingly, I think the framing, to put it all together, the framing here is nutrient density, right? And what is the full package that you're bringing to the table? And I think, like, all the speakers to some extent have mentioned this explicitly or implicitly in their comments. It's like, we can't use that narrow lens. Of course, I know that's the topic of the conversation. I think it's important, but if I were to imply and encourage folks to think a little bit more beyond this, is to think about what is the ultimate role that your product is playing in the consumer's life, and think about the broader health profile of that product, rather than simply, what protein am I going to put in? Yet at some point you're going to be in a tactical phase, but really think about that from a first principles perspective, because that's where consumers are going, and increasingly it's going to be easier for them to do so because of technology and data and information that's out there to make that type of choice. So thank you for allowing my little soapbox there, but I think it's important to think about a little bit of a broader picture in this context.
I guess that's why, Nick, I mean, coffee with protein seems to be doing well. Chips
Right.
with protein seems to be doing well. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have this data to back it up, but maybe that's the reason why these products or candy with protein seems to be doing really well too, right? Because consumers want, you know, a nutrient dense product at
Yeah,
all
yeah,
times.
yeah. Like think of it just as simply as this, right? If I know I'm going to get I'm looking for an indulgence, right? And all else being equal, it's like, oh, you know what? I'll grab the thing that has a little bit more protein. That that is something that people will think through. I know I do that too. I'm sure folks on the call too do as well. So I would just encourage think about that for the broader set of that consumption, and think about all those different pieces to the puzzle. And I think Alejandro's talked about the simplicity that they try. It's difficult, right? There's a lot of thought that goes into it, right? But the simplicity of that makes it a lot easier for the consumer to first of all understand what you're bringing to the table, but also you have less risk because you don't have this long tail of ingredients that people are like, oh, I don't want that thing or that thing, even though I like 90% of what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Mehmet, what are you saying? I mean, coming back to this question of what role does a source of protein play in consumer choices, especially with clean label? I mean, what are you saying with your clients?
I mean, basically, I would agree with all the speakers, panelists on this. It's a matter of like really personal, like that they are looking at the product's manufacturing side and also going to their clients, understanding their clients, looking for what is the product that they like to sell and what is the product that they like to present and be part of their consumers and their clients' lifestyle. So it's basically moving into a little bit more on the grasslands movement, like going back to that, my comment on the growth in the jerky products, going into meat snack products. Like yesterday, we did our feed programs accelerator, and there was one company, they had a chocolate bonbon, the cheese in it. So it's basically no sugar, and then no lactose, no milk, nothing. They put the cheese in it, and it's a complete chocolate bonbon from a company startup in Alberta, and they're doing great. So it's going back to some of the fundamentals, like cheese is coming back, and cheese snacks will be more and more, and then meat snacks going more and more. And you have to look at on the plant-based side, we have a lot of winners. Like if you look at maybe it's an indulgence, maybe it may not be as a snack, but you have to look at the growth in the hummus business in the last 25 years. Back in late line 90s, it started in the US. Now we are looking at $2.5 billion category, completely driven by a combination of a chickpea and tahini, and it's a wonderful plant-based snack. You have to look at the growth in the oat milk industry and extension of the oat milk. And now we are seeing high protein oat milks, high protein oat milks, so many different products with different fiber levels. So there are some really great success stories. I mean, everything is driven by the consumer. So we have to follow the consumer, and whatever they like, we have to present. And there has to be some education, but seems like, again, going back, like we have to really do some research on these Gen Zs and Gen Alphas more. They are consuming differently. And that's basically what we are seeing some of those impacts in the market too.
Okay, thank you, Mehmet. Alex, you mentioned capacity, restrictions in Canada. How severe is that?
I think it, excuse me, I think it depends on what you're looking at. I do think that there have been broad investments into plant-based research as well as capacity in Canada to, process our pulse crops. So I think that those elements, are certainly a topic that is securing funding, and there is investment happening there. Of course, then you also have a bit of a consumer shift in sort of the purchase of those, which we've talked about. I think it's hit or miss. We're a big country. It's hard to know what we have. A big part of our work at CFIN has been to identify resources, profile what's out there to help companies, because often there's a lot of hidden gems or capacity that, you won't know about if you're in Quebec City and the facility is in Alberta. And so trying to break down some of those barriers is important. I don't know if I have a full audit of where the gaps are today, but I do think that this trend has enough of staying power that that there are companies identifying opportunities for investment and increased capacity, and who are very successfully making those investments. And as consumers continue to pick up their products, it's going to reward them. So, yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Alejandro, when we were speaking, you mentioned about how sales, went beyond expectations for the dense high protein line of products, 40% more. Now, do you have the capacity to do more? Does Bimbo, or are you going to be retooling some of your plans? What is the conversation like internally?
Yeah, no, we're not stopping this. We're keep working on it. We're producing new categories, and now working on English muffins, naan, other different products. Yeah, we're building the capabilities to expand to different plants, and no, we're going 100%. We grew 72% versus last year, because we used to produce that SKU last year in Beaumatan in Quebec. And the Dempster's line, we cannot keep the tortillas in the stores. They are flying. So the product is really, really performing very well. The other Dempster's products as well, bagels. One of the tricks as well that I forgot I wanted to add there when talking about how to mask the flavor, for us has been the working with the spices and not like just seeds. The grain spread is a great tasting product, because it has also a blend of different grains and seeds. So we can still leverage whatever is regularly found in the bakery items to help us to deliver that texture and that flavor as well.
Thank you, Alejandro. Mehmet, what advice are you giving food manufacturers? I mean, there is capacity constraints within Canada. We're having, some ingredients are in short supply. So, what are you advising food manufacturers?
Yeah. So I mean, it's really it depends on the segment, right? Like there is some really good capacity we do in Canada, all over the country, and we've been talking to everybody in BC, in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, Atlantic. There is capacity, but like because of our current and also our historic industries. Like there are certain areas we don't have any capacity, and that makes it very difficult. Like one particular one I can talk about is like crackers, sheeted crackers, and there's a reason for it, because in Canada we don't grow as much soft wheat flour, so we don't produce enough soft wheat. So whether it's a soft white wheat or soft red wheat, these are primarily grown in Michigan, Ohio, Virginia, Indiana, like more Pennsylvania. And on the other side, soft white is Oregon, Washington. And we have very minimum production, and that goes to be milled in United States and captured in United States. So when you look at some of those sheeted crackers or others, like all the work we do as co-packer, we send it to US because there's no capacity, but we don't have that technical knowledge. But if you are looking at extruded snacks, extrusion manufacturing, or bakery or certain areas, we have capacities and we can put more. There's definitely room. We can put more. But like there will be always good to work with our neighbors, and it's always important to continue the relationship and to basically foster the collaboration. And because the market is all together, we see it as North American. So wherever like we can support, and our companies, they can sell and export to United States, that's a good thing for us.
Absolutely. That's right. Yeah. We don't have much time. So, Nick, I just have some last words from all of you. Let me start with you, Nick. How do you see this trend evolving in the next 3 to 4 years?
Yeah, I don't think protein's going anywhere. In the short term, but any stretch of imagination, I think it's what I've mentioned before, which is think about nutrient density, think about from first principles what your product is bringing to the table from a health and wellness perspective. And simplicity is increasingly going to be important. I can tell you that in the data, I looked at products that are free from artificial ingredients, flavors, sweeteners, things like that, and also have a protein claim. Those things are growing faster than products that are just have the protein claim by themselves. So we're already starting to see some of these things in there, and increasingly technology and other forces are certainly pushing a path dependency in that direction. So think nutrient density, think optimization of from a consumer lens perspective. Protein's going to be part of it, but it's not going to be the only thing.
Thanks, Nick. Before I go to Alex, there's a question here, Nick, that you may want to address. Are you seeing the high protein trend in B2B sales to institutions, whether it's hospitals, senior living, etc., for snacks or meals, or does this remain primarily a consumer snack trend?
I don't have a clear view to that. So it'd be difficult for me to say. I'd say directionally, it's probably going the same direction. I'd be curious to see whether it is to the same extent, but I can't see a scenario where they aren't going in the same direction. But degree would be the question.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Alex, how do you see this trend evolving in the next 3 to 4 years?
Yeah, agree with Nick. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think we're going to see more and more formats. We were at Future Food looking at, protein sparkling water. It's going to go. What might actually get launched here in Canada might be a little bit different. Obviously the US benefiting from a much larger market. So I think it will be less about do you have a protein product and more do you own certain formats of this high protein product? I think quality is going to continue to be a key factor. I think we're seeing, something like 58 to 65% of consumers from boomers to Gen Z are looking for protein and snacks. So there's a cross-generational demand, but those commodity level protein bars that we used to keep in the back of our pantry, the competition's so stiff now, I don't think those are seeing the same purchase. And then Canadian regulatory landscape is going to continue to be a major influencing factor. Front of pack has already had a major impact. Looking at whether or not we see protein quality standards or changes to the high protein claim thresholds. Our regulatory bodies are very influential on what we see here on the shelf, and they're also not often moving at the pace of consumer trends. So it'll be very interesting to see what impact they have.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. Alejandra?
Yeah, I think that we're going to start seeing that the protein it's going to move from a hero claim to a more of a baseline standard that it's just the minimum entrance. And it's going to be more part of a balanced package. So what we talked about in the past, you can add other layers on top of that. So what about fiber, what about gut health, clean label, avoidance of FOP. So all of these combined. And it's going to be part of the major staples, like food staples. Not a specific category. So part of just the blending.
Thank you, Alejandra. Mehmet, last word to you.
Thank you, Anita. It's been great to be part of the panelists. Thank you again for the invitation. I think I agree with Nick. It's not going anywhere, and it will continue growing. And we'll continue seeing more and more innovation. And going back to Alex's comment, I have to say that in a kind of a nice way, but it is much easier to import a product to Canada than to manufacture and produce and launch a product in Canada. So with all the regulations and all the things that the companies they are going through, so that is something that I think has to be stated. And for the future is really bright on the protein and all these products because one thing that we haven't touched as much, but it'll be good to say that. Is this whole protein growth we are seeing on the human food side, but there's all this 210 million of dogs and cats we have in the US and Canada. The pet food market is exploding. So there is a huge interest in the protein and the treats in there, like snacks that they consume too, that is absorbing a lot of protein, and that's the reason like we are seeing a lot of issues, concerns, and price and availabilities in the market. So there's nothing coming back. We keep growing this.
Absolutely. Do you see the price thing coming down any sooner, these issues stabilizing, or
Well,
no?
it will depend on the manufacturing and the industry decision. Like I was in Minnesota last week, and it's on I-29 going from Winnipeg down to all the way to Omaha, that road. They are building several dairy facilities there, like increasing the capacity for cheese and whey and additional drying capacities. And for us, as Alex mentioned, I didn't want to talk so much, is well, we have to go through the supply management. They have to increase the quota, like the overall investments, everything. We have to follow the protocols, and like it's not that easy to move, increase the capacity, and
Yeah.
address the needs. So we'll see how it goes on the dairy side. Like in plant-based, oat manufacturing in Canada, it's been doubled in the last 5 years, maybe close to tripled on the milling side. Plant-based on the pea protein, fava bean protein, there's been significant interest and doing more. There's another plant opening up in Saskatchewan this summer, a wet processing facility, 100,000 plus metric ton manufacturing. So there is definitely interest, and we can do more altogether with dairy and the milk. Well, we'll see. I mean, we'll follow what the government and regulations will say, and we'll support.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, thank you, Nick, Alex, Mehmet, and Alejandra, for your time today and for your insights into how manufacturers can find growth in an increasingly crowded high protein snack aisle. We also thank our sponsor, the National Sunflower Association, for supporting today's discussion. US grown high oleic sunflower oil helps food manufacturers navigate changing consumer expectations. With its neutral flavors, excellent shelf stability, and compatibility with other oils and solid fats, high oleic sunflower oil provides flexibility across a wide range of snack applications. Its non-GMO positioning, kosher and halal certified status, and ability to support texture and mouthfeel in plant-based products make it a valuable ingredient for brands developing the next generation of high-protein snacks. Visit sunflowernsa.com to learn more or find a supplier. A reminder that a recorded video of this presentation and discussion will be emailed to attendees over the next few days. Before you leave, please share your feedback about this webinar in the survey that will pop up after the broadcast ends. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the rest of the day.